Recording. Okay. This last session is all role playing, really, and discussion. And it's essentially a summary of all the workshops we've done so far. So we're going to be going back over just different scenarios for, just like regular, like KESA 101, things we talked about there, diversity and differences, grief, loss, and our response, and then campers with disabilities. So we're kind of running out of time, and I actually meant to leave a little bit of extra time for this, but I didn't. So that's okay because we had some good discussion. So starting off, I will share my screen. That way everyone can just kind of see it. But we're going to be starting with KESA 101. And so actually, I'm not going to share my screen. I don't need to. So for this one, this scenario, we'll just talk about it in a just large group. We'll do breakout rooms for the next thing that we do, but I think this will be beneficial for us just to do together. So the scenario is it's the sharing portion. I can talk. It's the sharing portion of empowerment, and you're in a small group breakout room with the purple unit, which is 11 to 13-year-olds. Someone just shared that their mom is in remission as of a few weeks ago, and the unit is celebrating. But another camper looks upset, and they unmute their microphone and they say somewhat sarcastically, "Wow, congrats. It must be nice to not have to worry about her anymore." Now, the first camper looks really hurt by that comment, and then they turn their camera off. So you have about 15 more minutes in empowerment. What are you going to do? How are you going to kind of reel that back in after that comment was made? It is a bit tough.
I feel like just a reminder for everyone that we're all here to support each other. Like, even though our situations are all the same, we're here for each other regardless, even if it's something that makes you upset. And it's okay that you can feel upset about that, but we don't want to put other people down, even though we are feeling upset at that moment as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important, to like reiterate that we are all just kind of here to support each other, like you said. And also, like, as the counselor, taking into consideration that the camper that made that kind of hurtful comment, that's also coming from a place of hurt, because maybe their situation is completely different from that camper. And so while it wasn't, okay for them to say that, kind of going back and keeping in mind that our campers that's them expressing how they feel to us, even though it came out in a hurtful comment. Anyone else have anything to add to that one? Something that you would do, something you would say? No? Okay. Well, yeah. I think Raptor's answer was definitely a really good one. Just reiterating that this is a supportive environment, and we all come from different experiences, and it's okay to feel the way that you're feeling, but just making sure that you are supporting your friends and supporting your other campers. Perfect. Okay, so for this next one, this is more of like a role play. So I'll put you into small groups so you can kind of talk about it. But the scenario is you are in a cabin chat with the orange unit, which is 8 to 11-year-olds, on the third day of KESA at home. One is 8, is sharing, and it's clear that they don't know much about cancer or their caregiver's diagnosis. As they're wrapping up, another camper, who's 11, chimes in and says something like, "My dad had that same cancer and he died when I was little." And the first camper is very confused and upset. How would you respond in that moment as a counselor? And what are some things that you might say or do? Kind of think of that. I have already made breakout rooms, so I will go ahead and do that now. But again, so one camper shares, and it's clear they don't understand really what the diagnosis is of their caregiver, and then someone else says that their dad had that cancer and he died, and so that obviously is very confusing for that other camper. So what are you going to do and what would you say? So I'll put us in breakout rooms so you can talk about that. Spend the next maybe 3-4 minutes talking about that. Okay,
What's up, y'all?
I think everyone's here. So how would you respond in this situation? What would you do? I think it's very important to not I guess to make sure that you're validating everyone's feelings. So especially sharing something like that, that's also something very like personal for that camper to share, like that, oh, my dad had that and he passed away when I was little. You don't want to dismiss that and dismiss the fact that that camper just shared that with you. But you also want to make sure that the other camper understands that every experience is different. I don't really know specifics of maybe what you would say. Does anyone have any ideas?
I would probably point out that everyone's like they might have had the same type of cancer, but the cancer is like the situation that they're going through may have been different. They are like different people.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely. I'd probably say to the second camper, like, I'm so sorry your dad died from that. That's not a fun experience. I'm so sorry you had to go through that. And then say to the other camper, kind of like what you and Zobo were saying, like every person has a different experience medically. So without obviously all this hesitation, yeah,
Yeah.
every experience is different. Every situation is different. So we just got to keep our hopes up and keep positive all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely a difficult one, especially with it being the same cancer. We don't want to like speak as if we're professionals, but we also don't want our camper to think just because one situation had the outcome doesn't mean every situation is going to have the outcome. So yeah, perfect. All right. I think we got done really quick, but I think that's good. Does anyone else have anything to share before we go back? No. All right. I'll see you in there. Perfect. I think everyone is back now. So let's talk about that just a little bit. So what was particularly challenging about that kind of conversation?
I think the fact that it would change, like our group, Goo and Elephant and I talked about how the context of the way that it came out kind of would depend on the reaction. Because if it came out during like empowerment, then you can have like a more serious reflection on it. But if it was like during a random activity, you kind of would want to maybe address it more privately and make sure like they have the emotional support they need and like make sure no one feels bad in that scenario. Like the camper that mentioned their caregiver passing away is not gonna feel like they're being a downer or something. Like
Right.
you just want to make sure everyone's needs are addressed.
Absolutely. Yeah, we kind of talked about that in our group in the sense of you want to make sure everyone, feels validated, where that's a very vulnerable thing to share, I feel. Sharing that their dad passed away. Like, you don't want to not acknowledge that, because that was a very, brave thing to share. And you want to acknowledge, I'm so sorry that happened. I think that's kind of what Raptor said, I'm sorry. That's really hard. But thank you for sharing that. But then also making sure you're addressing the other camper as well, for sure. What did anything, if anything, what felt natural about maybe the things that you shared, or what you would say or do? Did anything kind of just come naturally to you, addressing the situation?
I feel like acknowledging that first camper, or like I guess the second camper technically, who said like their parent died from it, just being like, I'm so sorry, like that's a horrible thing to happen. And then making sure the other camper knows, like, just because, this camper's parent died does not mean yours will, without actually saying that, because it could be taken as way like, well, they could, we don't know. But like also making sure, like, just keep positive vibes and everything will be okay. Like, it's all gonna turn out okay.
For sure. What other kinds of situations could you see coming up during CASM at home that would be kind of similar to this? Maybe something that another camper would say. I think maybe sometimes, I guess really with any age group, but I think I see it a lot in the younger groups, just wanting to relate to your peers. And so then, just like in the situation, kind of like coming out with something that to you just seems, like, oh, I can really relate to you, but could end up potentially being, upsetting to another camper. How do you think that your response would be different depending on the age of the camper? So, like with younger campers versus older campers, how would your response be different?
I feel like with younger campers, we'd want to be a lot more gentle with the topic to make sure we're not scaring them, and just making sure like they know everything is okay. Like, nothing's wrong right now. Like, everything's okay. And then with older campers, maybe making it a little bit more serious, but in terms like they understand, but also not in a way to scare them. So that way they think like everything's gonna start falling apart soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone else? Yeah, I think you hit it right on the nose. It does depend on the age, and like you said, you don't want to like scare anyone into thinking that something could go wrong. But I think, kind of adding on, you don't want to necessarily like. This sounds weird. I don't know how to phrase this. You don't want them to be under the impression that, oh, like it'll all work out okay, because there is the possibility it couldn't. But just making sure that in that moment they know, like, hey, everything is fine right now, and it, you are safe, everything is fine. Just like kind of making sure that they know that at least like in this moment, all is well. It can be hard, but yeah, for sure. Okay. So moving on, more so now into diversity and differences. So we have our first scenario. So an activity wrapped up early, and the unit, the TLP, they're bonding and chatting with the time that they have left. One camper shares the details of a recent firsthand experience with racism. How would you kind of like approach this as the counselor? How would you kind of approach this discussion? What would you say? What would you do?
They're just talking about a time that they've encountered it, like.
Yeah,
Okay.
just I think these are the older, these are TLPs, so it's like an older age group.
Like it happened to the camper, or they're just talking about like experiencing it around them?
Like a firsthand experience they had
Gotcha.
with.
think I think we can share, right? We're not doing breakout rooms.
No, yeah. No,
Okay.
yeah.
I think the first thing I would say is, I don't know if this would be an odd thing to say, but I think I would want to hear something if I were in a position like that. I would say I believe you. I would just tell them that I believe that that happened and that wasn't right. And that it doesn't define who you are.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think definitely checking on the camper and making sure, like seeing how much this impacted them and giving them the support they need is definitely what you need to do. I agree with you too. Like it's important that they feel heard and seen.
Absolutely. Anyone else have anything to share? Perfect. Yeah, I think those are great examples, great ways to approach this situation. I think instead of going in a small group, we'll just stay in a big group for this next part, but kind of building off of the previous scenario. You as the counselor have responded to the camper who shared, affirmed their experience, but it seems like the camper wants to share a little bit more about that experience with the rest of the unit. However, before they have a chance to, another camper chimes in and they say, that doesn't sound like racism to me. And the first camper immediately kind of just shuts down, doesn't want to talk. How would you approach that situation?
I would first like kind of touch on that everybody's perceptions are very different, and while that thought may be very valid for that particular camper, we are not maybe it's not like that intentional as to that camper taken away from the other camper's feelings, but then also just coming back to say like you know we're all friends here, and while we give everybody the space to talk, we also don't want to make our other friends feel like they're unvalidated, but still not like putting it in a way to make it seem like what they said was totally wrong, because everybody has a right to their own opinion, but you know still making the other camper feel validated.
Yeah, absolutely. Making sure like there's that understanding of, that experience is that camper's. And so that is how they feel. Those are their feelings, and like validating that and making sure that they understand that maybe, to them, it may not seem like that, but that is the experience of that camper. So no one can really tell that camper how they should feel or how they should perceive a situation.
Yeah, I think keeping the conversation going would also be good, because if they still have more to share and they feel like they can't, like you drawing the conversation out of them or asking like, why do you think that, or something like that, and then having it just be more thought is put into it, and maybe that's the issue, that it was just like a thoughtless kind of reaction.
Yeah,
I think having a more in-depth conversation could be helpful.
for sure. Awesome. Anybody else have anything to add to that? Okay, perfect. Let's move on then to the next one. We may go a little over time, to be quite honest, because I do want to get through all of these. We only have 2 more. If you have to go at noon, feel free, but we'll probably just continue until we can get through these. But so this next one, now we're going to be looking at what we went over today, grief, loss, and our response. So our first scenario, you're in empowerment and a 13-year-old camper shares that their parent was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer 6 months ago. They say, I think I stressed my mom out and it's making her cancer worse. Their video is off, but you can tell they're upset by their voice. Your group is supposed to transition to the next activity in 5 minutes. How do you respond?
I feel like that would be an instance where you would want to ask them if they would like to chat more about that with you and another counselor. I don't know if that would happen like in a breakout room or something. I'm not sure.
I definitely think, yeah,
Yeah.
setting up a 2-on-1, or if you want to even talk to the therapist that we have on hand, the mental health professional, like, you would just want to make sure that they're not blaming themselves for something that's not their fault, you know? And I think setting either like having that meeting then, or setting up a for sure time for later, like ASAP, if you're going to transition, and make sure everyone else is taken care of too, is definitely of the utmost importance.
Definitely something you can turn over to camp advisor. That's definitely what she's there for. So I would she would probably be the first person you would want to turn to, just to see what you think you can do. I'm not sure if we're allowed to do breakout rooms or not, with just a camper and counselor.
2 counselors, not just 1-on-1.
Right.
Still
Yeah,
keeping the ratio.
And I don't know. I feel like we said something last time about it, but that would definitely be something you want to do, because it is kind of hard because you are at the very end of that activity. So you want to make sure that, you know, everyone else is taken care of, but still want to address that. Yeah, like he said. Perfect.
Right.
I feel like we're not going to do small groups the rest of this time because it feels like it takes so long. So, for this next next scenario, you are in the TLP cabin chat. In response to another camper, Bug says, "If I lose my dad, I don't even want to be here." You ask a follow-up question and they don't say anything. How do you respond, or what do you do?
To me, that does sound like an instance of wanting to check in with mental health counseling. That's just like an indication of some kind of suicidal ideation. So that would be a good thing to check in with mental health.
Definitely. Where the line comes in.
Yeah,
and
I was definitely going to say that. I was going to say, like, maybe if we were like at camp, that's why the mental health professionals are there, and I would, take that like directly to them. But for an instance over, because I'm at home and we're on Zoom, I mean, I know that you can call the hotline kind of before you talk to like our camp advisor, like Lizard, but I would like first let her know, like, hey, I'm about to call the hotline, and then call. Like, that's something that definitely has to be dealt with, like, right there.
Yeah, you call. Yeah, definitely call the hotline first. Yes, you can. I think Blizzard's gonna be in a group chat with us. Is that correct? Okay, so I was gonna say you can always find her and send her a quick message that you're gonna be doing that, and you can follow up with her if you feel like it's needed after you call the hotline. Kind of going off of this, how if it would be, do you think your response would be different if it was like a younger camper? So this was a TLP, but say it was, a younger camper. How would you respond? Would it be the same way? Would you do something different?
For me, I think it, I know it would be the same reaction, because while there is a different age group, it's still the same, situation. So like it wouldn't change.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it also kind of, there's an additional question where it says, like, would your response be different if the camper said, "I'm just joking," afterwards, which, it should still be the same. Even if they say they're joking, that's still a very serious thing to say. So you still definitely want to call the hotline. Okay, so our, let's see, last one that we have, this is for campers with disabilities. So the first scenario, you you are leading an activity that depends entirely on an external website. One of the counselors points out that the website is not very accessible for one of the campers. This camper has loss of vision in one eye. This is the only thing you currently have planned for the next hour. How do you respond? What do you do to make activity accessible, I suppose? This one's a little more tricky.
Depending on what it is, as a counselor, like facilitator, host, whichever role you're in, that the inclusion part is very, very important here. I think if it was like me in that situation, I would say, I can play for you and I can, let you know like what's happening and, ask you, kind of be like the liaison between that camper and the activity.
Yeah, for sure. Anything else? I think that's a really great idea, especially since there's nothing else planned. So kind of scrambling to try to find something else wouldn't really work out. So yeah, being a liaison is a great idea. Anything else that anyone has to add? Oh my God. Okay, so let's move on. You are a counselor for the 10 to 12-year-olds. Your unit has a camper named Toast. Toast is a camper with autism who has been coming to Kesem for a few years now. You're about to split up into breakout groups and play Pictionary. Another camper, Firefly, types in the chat that they do not want to be stuck in a group with Toast. Another camper repeats this out loud. Toast's caregiver is in the background, hears this, and comes into the frame. What do you say? How do you respond?
Oh, I feel like my first gut instinct would be to say, I want to be with Toast. Like, I want to be in a group with Toast. Toast sounds cool. I know
Yeah.
Toast.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know what I'd do after that, though.
That's fair. No, that's a good start, though. Absolutely. That Toast feels, welcome and included and knows that, like, we want him to be there. Anybody else? What would you do maybe after that? So keeping in mind, like, that their caregiver is in the background. What would be your next step, I suppose?
I don't know if this is like the best reaction, but my brain said, apologize to the parents on behalf of the campers. But then that could also take away from a genuine apology from the campers. But then I would also, go back to saying, hey, the chat is used for positive things only, and we're all friends here, regardless of, how we are. Toast is gonna play, and we can all work together, and yeah, basically.
Yeah, I think acknowledging the chat bar for sure. So after I think like pairing yours and Goose together. So I want to be in a group with Toast, and then just saying let's keep in mind like the chat is for supporting each other and for positive things. We're supposed to be nice in the chat. So yeah, definitely acknowledging that is a good step to take. What would your response be? I guess would your response be different if Toast's caregiver wasn't there, or would it be the exact same way?
My response would still be the same.
Yeah, I agree. I think it definitely should be. Perfect. Okay. Let's see. We do have, I thought that was our last one. We do have one more. So like I said, we're gonna continue with this. If you have to go at noon, feel free. But we're just gonna continue on with our last one. So for this one, it is the second day of Custom at Home, and your unit is doing one of the arts and crafts activities. One returning camper, French Fry, who is 12, yells, "This is so stupid. I'm bored. I hate Zoom," and he leaves the call. And the rest of the campers look confused, and a few of them turn their cameras off. How do you respond to this?
Um, mm, because we have multiple people on the call that have different roles, I think as a host, if I was a host, I would immediately like email, the parents, like have them BCC'd, or have email them, but have like Beans and Lizard like CC'd or BCC'd, just to check on the camper. As a facilitator, I don't know. I don't want to like. I wouldn't maybe address it, because then it's like carrying on, like, oh, does anybody else feel that way? Like, and maybe
Yeah.
that's not the point. So I don't think that's like very, like a topic that just would be pointed out, like carried on as a conversation. I think I would, that's very valid of him or her to feel. We have been on Zoom for a very long time, so that's, very valid. But then continuing on with the activity.
Yeah, so this may just be like a situation for a redirection. Just like you said, just keeping it going, because you don't want to say something that makes it seem like, even though the camper isn't on the call anymore, you don't want to invalidate their feelings, because how's that going to look to the other campers. So for sure. I also like that you pointed out the different roles of, host and facilitator. So that's definitely something that the host would be responsible for doing. Facilitator, just keep it going, redirect. Anybody else have anything to add? One question to ask, do you think that there was anything that maybe we could have done proactively, either before Custom at Home, like the week of camp, or at the beginning of the activity that we could have done, as a proactive measure to the situation? It's okay if not.
I think that part just depends on the age of the camper, and if they feel like the activity is like age appropriate for them.
Yeah, that's a good point to make, for sure. Awesome. Okay. Well, I do have like a kind of debrief, but I'll just make it super quick. So we don't have to share, but just something that I want you guys to be considering. So there's just 3 separate things. So like based on the discussion that we had, what's one or more thing that you want to consciously start doing, especially in regards to virtual facilitation and doing on Zoom? And then also, what is one thing that you want to consciously try to stop doing? And then what is one thing that you do well that you want to continue doing? So just keep that in mind. If you want to share, feel free, but if not, that is all I have. Thanks for sticking around. I appreciate it, and thanks for all your guys' hard work today. It was great, and I'm happy I got to see your faces.
You did a great job.
Thank you.
Um,
I'll next week, I guess. So
Thank you.
have a
Bye.
great day, everybody.
bye, Elson. Bye, Vanessa.